So if everyone's happy, I thought we might kind of get started. People will continue to filter in, but I thought it'd be a good idea to start. So welcome everybody. Thanks for turning up. It's really great to see so many people in the room. The focus on this workshop is going to be all about connecting people, so making those connections. Before we sort of head into the content, if I can ask you, if you're not currently speaking, if you wouldn't mind just muting yourself, it just stops some of the feedback, which can be really unpleasant once it kind of gets going. So in terms of the workshop and how it's going to run, I'll introduce you to everybody who's going to be speaking. So we've got a couple of different speakers, which we're really grateful they've taken time today to come and chat about what they've been doing and what they're currently doing. And then we're going to talk about the project, the Enterprise and Communities project, and what we found as a result of that, and what the research from Birmingham University found. And then there's going to be opportunity to really sort of home in and listen to the enterprises from Herefordshire and really understand what it was they did in terms of actual practical things. What does it really mean to make those connections? And then there'll be an opportunity then to have a discussion about what you've heard, and then maybe to discuss for all of us what it means to be lonely, and how, you know, with the next 6 months coming for all of us now, not just people out there, but actually all of us, we're all facing this now. What can we do as professionals and as people to get through the next couple of months and help and support each other best we can? So you'll be familiar now a little bit with the platform, so you'll know some of the things. So if you're a viewer but you'd like to say something, if you could pop your statement or your question or whatever you'd like to say up into chat, then we've got Angela monitoring that, and Angela will be able to speak on your behalf. If you're a presenter in the room, then at the end we'll invite you to ask some questions in person. And then we're going to have some polls where you get some interaction, and you get to kind of talk to us about your experience of loneliness, isolation, and the community response to that. So our first and most important slide is who is everybody. So I'm Tess Brooks. I work for Community Catalysts. I also happen to be the catalyst that ran the project in Herefordshire with our partners, Herefordshire Council. My background is in mental health. I'm a trained mental health professional, and I've got a real passion and a real interest around how the community can really support people who are in challenge and in a difficult space, and how they can really be part of people's recovery. So that's me, and I'll now hand you over to Simon.
Hi, my name is Simon Lennane. I'm a GP at Alton Street Surgery in Russell Y in Herefordshire on the Welsh borders. I'm also lead for the mental health part of the commissioning group, so I provide clinical input into mental health, and I'm a clinical director of a primary care network. For those of you who don't know about PCNs, it's a kind of new structure within healthcare where we it's kind of organisation. For us, it's 6 surgeries. The idea is an organisation covering between 30 to 50,000 patients. And at the moment, I'm the clinical lead for that. But I'm a trustee of Ross Community Development Trust as well, because I've got a real interest in, I think, what I'm going to call community health. I've not heard it called that. It's funny, public health has already been taken, but I think it's an interesting title of sort of the overlap in terms of what a resilient community looks like, and actually how we tap into the sources of support within our community. So I've heard it called other things. Asset-based community development is probably the best known one, but from my point of view, it's the health aspects of what's going on around us that I'm really interested in. So thanks so much for inviting me.
Thanks for coming along, Simon. And we've also got Jane, who will be joining us next week when we have the next one. And we've got Maggie as well from Rejuvenate. Maggie, would you like to introduce yourself?
I will, thank you. Hi, thanks, Tess. Yes, Rejuvenate. We're a creative carers group. We are based in Hereford, but we cover the whole of Herefordshire. And we are here to support carers in a creative way. If you aren't creative, that really doesn't matter. We want to take away the stigma of creativity being something for a certain group of people. We've changed how we work differently over the last 6 months, but I think we're getting there. And the title, Passionate People, making a positive difference, was what really made me want to be part of this. And yeah, that's it really. I'm a former carer, but both my parents have now passed away, and it's given me some time to put something back, and that's what I hope to do for as long as I can.
Thanks, Maggie. So just to talk a little bit about the project for those of you who may not be familiar. So the Enterprise and Community Project was one of 4 sites. So ours was based in Herefordshire, but there were also sites in York and Telford and Reeking. The focus was really around loneliness and increasing community wellbeing. And it was delivered in partnership with local authority partners in both York and Herefordshire. So these 2 projects kind of mirrored each other, but just in different areas. And the work that was being done was around supporting enterprises of all sizes. So some were really, really tiny. One person was wanting to get together a group of like-minded people or people with a similar experience. So one that springs to mind was around belly dancing for people who had IBS and other digestive challenges. And they wanted to get a group together, right through to much larger enterprises where people wanted to set up sort of longer term, more structured charities and trusts that would be able to generate money and enable them to offer services and activities in a more long term kind of way with a broader remit. So it ran over a period of 2 years. We worked with over 100 enterprises during that time. And during that time, Birmingham University were also exploring what was the impact of Community Catalyst and Herefordshire Council supporting people who were wanting to do this. What was it that they needed to get that activity off the ground and to enable it to happen, essentially? Was it information? Was it funding? Was it actually just somebody to sort of walk alongside them whilst they were taking that journey? But what do we learn as a result of the university's report was that actually connected communities which really focus on what a person can do, so not really focusing on the health condition or the thing that the individual finds difficult, but actually really focusing on where their strengths lie, what are they good at? Because we've all got something to offer, no matter how difficult our situation may be or what our challenges might be, we have something to offer the wider community. And in offering that, we get something back as well. And that's the next point, really, is talking about that reciprocity that we give out, but actually when we give people something or we help others, we do something for others, actually we get a great deal ourselves. We get a sense of value, a sense of purpose, a sense of worth, a sense of agency, especially if we've been in a situation where we have found things difficult, we haven't been able to solve or fix something that's been big. And those things are really powerful in terms of what happens around people's mental health. Also, it's around kind of helping community enterprises to stay a strong part of creating spaces and resources that connect and contribute. So just not thinking about in that 2 years, what can we help to get going and get started, but really taking that long view of what do we want to be here in 2 years, 5 years time? How can we support people to not only develop something that is good and helpful now, but that can grow and respond? And I think that we've realised in the last 6 months, kind of looking back, that actually we've seen, and we'll hear more from Simon and Maggie later about how that early work may have enabled individuals and groups and trusts and all sorts of sizes of enterprises to respond to the crisis and to people in the community. And I think that it also talks about the importance of connection and having a purpose and having that connection in the wider community. Ultimately, whilst we're all sat here feeling very different from the animals out there, we are ultimately just animals who are social creatures that need to belong. We all have that innate need to belong somewhere and to a group, and belonging somewhere and being part of something gives us something that we can't get through any other kind of activity that we have in our lives. So it's really important to be able to feel connected. So I'm going to sort of hand over now and talk a little bit about one of the enterprises that we worked with and supported, which was the Ross Development Community Trust. And Simon, you'll be able to speak to this and tell us all about the fantastic work that you guys did.
Oh, thank you, Tess. That's really kind. I can see the chat box on the right, so do come up with questions. Please bring questions through, because I haven't got slides prepared. I was just going to talk a little bit about where this came from. I'm a GP. I've worked in the town for 17 years. I've got a particular interest in mental health, and a few years ago we started a kind of steering group for mental health within the town, really just to try and understand where the issues were. We've got a really vibrant voluntary sector in the town. I'm lucky. It's a market town in rural Herefordshire with I think 20,000 people if you cover the surrounding villages as well. But it's very well defined. Everyone knows everyone, and so actually it's really easy to do at that sort of scale. I think it's harder to do as a smaller scale and as a bigger scale. And when you get to cities, they've all got their own kind of sub areas, whereas actually for us we've got this delineated area, so that made things more straightforward doing it. But what we recognized was that the community sector, there were lots of good, interesting things going on, but they weren't connected at all. And every week I would find out something new about some group that was going on, and I realized I didn't have a directory of services. So I'm really keen on demedicalizing. A lot of the problems that we see are not medical in origin. A lot of the stuff that I'm faced with as a GP is around housing or benefits, or loneliness being the major thing that we deal with, disconnection from society. It's a odd thing about the maths is that we don't tend to know many people who are lonely, because if you're connected, you know lots of people, whereas lonely people only know a few people. So very few people know someone who is lonely. So it sounds odd, but if you see what I mean in terms of the maths, actually you just don't have the connections. As a GP, I'm one of the only people that some people know. I'm certainly, for a lot of my patients, I'm the only person who ever touches them. And that is kind of quite a salient point when you realize that actually sometimes people are coming to see me with a medical problem, and actually it isn't necessarily medical. It might just be that they're reaching out for human connection. And so when you start to recognize that, you start to think actually the problems that this patient is coming with aren't necessarily going to be solved by me and my prescription pad. So what are the other ways that I can try and engage with this? So we do have access to social prescribers in the surgery. I still have a problem with the model. It's a very medical model. It's gate kept by GPs. So essentially I would refer to a social prescriber, and they would do some more intense a period of work with someone to try and evaluate the issues. But it's still very much the medical model. It's GP gate kept, and actually if you're a probation worker or the vicar or anyone else working with people, why do you not have the same access? So what we wanted to do, we knew social prescribing was coming in, was trying to find a way that everyone could access the sources of support in the community. And I'm sure you'll all have got to this point. It comes down to directory of services. That's a really important thing. It comes up at every single meeting that I'm at. Do you have a directory of services? Do you know what the things are around you? And we do have one in Herefordshire, a thing called Wish, which is a website which has the stuff going on. But actually there's a need for something local. But the other issue that we really wanted to address was how you support the voluntary sector. The other thing is, you notice groups come and go, and I think it's okay to recognise that. We sometimes we recognise that groups are beneficial, and from health we spend a lot of time trying to support a group, but actually recognising that they have a finite life, and acknowledging that and being prepared to deal with it, I think is really important. Often they're driven by people with energy, and then someone gets unwell or someone moves away. And what I wanted to do was to make it much easier for a new group to form, so that there's always that level of support. someone came to me and said, I'd like to set up a yoga group for people with mental health difficulties. And it's a brilliant idea. Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. We should do that. But you realise all the things that you would need to do that. You'd need a safeguarding protocol and a bank account and a source of, for referrers to know that that was a genuine thing to refer into. And we realised actually, if we provided that as an infrastructure, if we provided all these things, it means that groups can go ahead and do the stuff that they're interested in. If you're interested in yoga, you don't want to be messing around with safeguarding protocols. You want to be able to go ahead and do those things. So that was the initial idea from it. And so we looked at a way of trying to provide this and came up with the Community Development Trust. Essentially, we run almost in parallel with the council, but we're able to do things that the council slightly hampered from doing. We've got a lot more flexibility, but also the kind of input from health, from social care, is just a much better multidisciplinary team. So I think it's worked really well. So you're absolutely right. Loneliness, the biggest problem for 18 to 25-year-olds. You're right. We focus on it much more for older people. But if you ask people in terms of subjective experience of loneliness, the most common age group for people experiencing loneliness is younger people. So absolutely spot on. So coming back to the Community Development Trust, we're now setting up a good neighbour scheme. The idea being that there'll be a buddy on each street or in each sort of area who would be able to signpost people towards sources of support, so that they have access to the various different groups that are going on. And we've got a list of these groups to be able to make sure that people have got easy access to be able to tie into groups, so they don't have to come through the GP, they don't have to come through the social prescriber. Essentially, it's just, to me, it seems a much more kind of natural model of community, and to try and demedicalise it is really where it's at. So I can focus on the medical aspects of things rather than trying to medicalise issues that really I'm not the best person to deal with. So it all boils down to asset-based community development. It's looking at the resources within our community, and for me, being able to use those and this kind of wider view of a supportive community of all the strengths within the community. Are there any questions? Tess, does that give a reasonable coverage?
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thanks, Simon. Simon, would you be okay if I shared the video that was made now? That'd be okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Brilliant. So we worked with Simon and the team to create a video to show what fantastic work they've all been doing. It's always really good to see something in action. So you might need to sort of mute yourself so that there isn't too much feedback when the video is playing. So here.
I was elected mayor in 2019, and I've been planning for some time to make my mayoral project about loneliness in the town, because we have an elderly demographic here anyway. And it seemed to me that loneliness was an issue, and it was something that we could realistically address. We had to move away quite rapidly from our initial plans because of the pandemic. And so what we had to do instead was provide central services. We have a team out delivering prescriptions. We had a team offering pet cares. We set up a community oximeter library. So oximeters are the little things that they clip on your finger when you go into A&E, and they measure your oxygen levels.
A lot of the stuff we see as GPs is not really medical in origin. Much of the stuff we see is related to loneliness, is related to isolation, is related to lack of community. And so what I wanted to do was try and find other sources of support. So essentially social prescribing, the idea of community-based non-medical sources of support. And so what we wanted to do was try and empower the various groups in our community to be able to provide that, make it easier for me to refer into that.
We're a charitable incorporated organisation. We wanted charitable status because of all the legal advantages that brings, and we wanted incorporation because we had big ideas, and you have that limited liability, and you have directors, but you also have all the accountability, of course, that comes with that.
Community Catalyst helped us to identify the structure that would be most helpful for our organisation, that would give us the most freedom to achieve the aims that we wanted to do. In this case, a CIO being giving us the most flexibility.
For people who were relative novices, I mean, I've been involved in the voluntary sector for a very long time, but I'd never actually set up a charity before. So it was all very, very new to me. And it was tremendously reassuring, that we had community catalysts as backup, as it were.
Some of them have started off quite distressed, particularly in the early days. And it's been good to just be a cheerful voice on the end of the phone. And I always say to the rest of the team, and there's a significant team that we have, answer and talk with a smile. It's difficult to know what motivates volunteers. All of us are motivated by different things, but I think everybody responds well to somebody responding well to them. And that's a two-way thing, of course.
We volunteered for various things, but not particularly for this, but we felt it was nice to be able to make a contribution.
And I feel like, it gives you a little bit of power back in a powerless situation.
So the next step is to develop a Good Neighbour scheme, trying to enable people to build on the good work that's already happening in our community. So to improve their cohesiveness and to improve the communication. So what we'd really like is a system of neighbourhood buddies. So people, ideally in each locality or in each street, so someone who's a named contact who will be able to connect people in or signpost people towards the sources of support that are available.
My impression was the voluntary sector in Ross was that it's absolutely tremendous. It's doing amazing things, but it's doing it very much in a sort of heads down, let's get on with it way. And people aren't very necessarily aware of all the services that are available to them.
I think there's a way to go for particularly people who are commissioning services to recognise the strengths of the voluntary sector and actually the cost effectiveness of the voluntary sector to use the resources that are already in the community. So that's where we're going to get the benefit. That's how we're going to turn things around. It's not investing more in hospitals and in high-end treatments. It's about recognising the resources that are already available to us.
Really great to see their work, I think, in action. It's great to hear Simon talking, but it's also really nice to, I think, actually see it in action. So we'll come back for some questions to both the enterprises a little bit later, but I want to make sure that Maggie, and invite Maggie to talk a little bit about Rejuvenate and the work that they've done and been doing, especially in the last couple of months. So over to you, Maggie.
Thank you. Right, okay. I was introduced to Tess, I think it's probably 18 months ago now. Myself and another family carer, Lisa, who is actually going to take part in this next week, we co-founded Rejuvenate 3 years ago now. We were helped along by a small pot of money from Herefordshire Carers Support that had the money there available for what they called creative carers. We needed a venue, we needed a name, and we needed some guidance, really. The courtyard at Hereford kindly gave us a free space to meet each month, which carried on for a couple of years, and we did get the support from Tess. When Herefordshire Carers Support were no longer the provider for Herefordshire, we had to set up independently. So we had to get a bank account, we had to have a constitution, we had to do a risk assessment at the courtyard, and all those things that had never occurred to me. I just wanted to paint and sew and help people's well-being and just be enthusiastic with what I knew best. But these things were important, and we did need some advice. As I said, we carried on for a couple of years. We probably had on average about 15 plus carers coming along each month, and we had local speakers. We run workshops ourselves. The last session in March of this year, ironically, we'd invited students from the art college, and they came along, about 6 or 7 of them. It seems an ice age ago now, but they were full of enthusiasm and youth, and they mixed well with the carers, and we did some screen printing, and it was a really vibrant, busy morning. Now, little did we know that within 2 weeks, things would be very different. So what were Rejuvenate going to do? We used to send out monthly posters telling the carers what we were putting on that month, and that was really our only email or online connection with them. But we've got a group of volunteers. Well, we're all volunteers, but we've got other volunteers who come up with ideas and cut paper up and do lots of important things. So we had a think, and we decided that we'd try and put together a newsletter. I did it to start with on Word. I mean, looking back, it was quite primitive, but it got the information across that we wanted. And we were doing that fortnightly, and we carried on doing that every 2 weeks until September. We managed to get some funding from Western Power, I think it was, to run out another idea, because the newsletter was fine. That was all going along nicely, and we were now doing it on Canva, and it was all getting rather good. But what were we going to do next? So we decided to design and make craft bags for carers. Now, I think you can see here, because I've got some on my desk. Each month, we're now doing it monthly. We're doing the newsletter monthly, and we're putting together craft bags which are being delivered. Some are being hand delivered, some are being delivered by post to carers in their homes. Now, it can be anything from making a needlework lavender bag. It can be making cards. We've got lots of ideas, but importantly, it's something special. It's something special that they're getting through their door every month. They can probably share it with their cared for. We've had so much feedback from carers. It's making them feel special. We all like to get something through the post that's not in a brown envelope. Well, mine are in bright blue envelopes, so they know when they've arrived. And the comments and feedback that we're getting is tremendous. So that's what we're doing, and we want to continue to do that. Connecting with people is so important. I don't think I realized at the time how important those connections would be. But for example, I connected with a lady at Birmingham who runs their creative carers group at the museums, Rosie Barker. We've been over to Birmingham. That was in February. Again, little did we know. But Rosie invited us to go over there, and we had a look to see what they were doing at the museum there. We've connected, and one of the people today who's joined us is part of a group in Bath, Creativity Works. Again, they're a charity. They are they're there just to help art and well-being, and we've had a lot of help from them with digital training, and they invited us again, Lisa and I, to take part in workshops. They were doing a well-being challenge in August. What other connections have I had? I've been into local nursing homes. I've been to Kingston Court. I've been to where they cared for my mum, and I've kept connections with them. I've been to Credenhill Court, just really to show people that creativity doesn't have to be, I think I said this at the beginning, it can be gardening, it can be cooking, it can be writing a letter. It can be what you want it to be, but at the end of the day, I think you'll feel better just doing something for yourself. That's probably the easiest way I can describe it, and having a little bit of me time, focusing on something that's important.
Thanks, Maggie. Maggie, can you tell everybody how many people you think you've supported during the crisis in the last?
How many? We've now got 50 plus that we are sending the newsletter and the craft bags out to. But as well as the 50 odd carers, we have a list of professionals as well, and that now is, I think, almost 60. So the same information is going out to health officials, social care, other professional artists, the council. Yeah, so it's wide and varied, but we're certainly, we want to reach more. I think that's the one final thing I'd like to say is our aim would be to have the newsletters printed and delivered to people at home who don't have that online access.
Yeah.
And that's something, that's the next stage, if you like, and that's what we'd like to be able to do. But yes, it's
that's great.
The passion is there. We just need it just needs to all come together, and I think it is doing.
It's all the practicalities, isn't it, Maggie? I think
all the practicalities, yes.
Yeah, your passion definitely sort of comes through, and I think you mentioned a really interesting point actually around loneliness and isolation and connections in terms of digital deprivation. I think especially rural areas, I think there can be a lot. So while there are some really fantastic resources, particularly in our area of the woods, like Wish and different groups, but if you don't have access to the internet at the moment, you don't really have access to life and to people, and I think that's a really interesting point that you make actually, Maggie. I'd like to invite everybody in the room now to ask either Simon or Maggie any questions or make any comments about what they felt about what they heard. What we've got a few comments on that.
A few good comments and questions, Kat. We had some questions early on when Simon was talking. Reese has got a good question. I don't know whether he can ask that himself.
He can. Would you like to ask that, Reese?
Yeah, and I suppose it was just amazing, setting up organisations. Essentially, my question was around how do you get it all organised? There's obviously a collective will there, and from the video, it sounds like you've got some amazing people there and skills, but it's just the how, isn't it? What are your sort of key tips in an area for getting that organisation, getting that momentum, essentially?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I was lucky in having people who got it. Jane is amazing. She is coming at it from a different angle, but absolutely gets where we were trying to get to. And Melvin, again, I've been working with for years. And so I had a group of people who really got it, but then Tess came along and really showed us how to put that into practice. I had no experience doing it. I still don't really understand a lot of the structures, but the CIO, for instance, Tess really helped us to understand the structure that would give us the kind of least a way to achieve what we wanted to do without picking up loads of liability, which would piss off trustees. So that worked really well. In terms of the kind of governance of things, we DBS check all our volunteers. The diocese was doing it initially, but we're now going to register as an organisation that can DBS check. And actually that might bring in a bit of income, because we think we can undercut some of the other places doing it locally, so we can DBS other people. We had a really useful meeting with all the voluntary sectors. So we said, look, we're all going to meet, and lots of people came along. They found it really helpful just talking to each other and recognising that a lot of the problems we have, particularly for people working with younger people, transport's a major issue, but actually just to put people together. And they started chatting about it. Well, so-and-so's got a minibus, actually, yeah, it's free on a Wednesday. Those things, they just sort of take off. Once you give people, you get people in a room together, you get them talking, and they start realizing actually there are solutions to these issues. But yeah, it really helps having people who get it. We just had a core of 3 or 4 people who really knew what we were trying to achieve, and that just it snowballed from there, really. So we were very lucky.
We've also had a question from Zoe Miller. Zoe, would you like to ask your question in person? Well, it's more a statement, really, isn't it?
Yeah, so it was really just a reflection. Is this on the buddy system that you mentioned? Yeah, so I thought I love the sound of it, particularly because it's just about neighbours supporting each other. And I think I really liked what you were saying, Simon, about how trying to deprofessionalize it and demedicalize it, and just helping people to connect. And I think Tess, you mentioned as well earlier about, I guess, the role that in giving, we gain so much through giving. I was thinking actually it's great. Creating roles like that also allows people to maybe step up and be that person to others in their neighbourhood. So yeah, I really like the sound of that model.
Yeah,
I know I'm interrupting here, but if anybody hasn't come across Camarados, they are amazing, and one of their 6 tenets is if you see somebody struggling, ask them to help you. Not ask them what help they need, but ask them to help you. And I think that's just kind of mirroring what Zoe said, really.
It's a really powerful message, isn't it? That actually instead of doing for, just rephrasing it can be so powerful. I think. We've got in the chat a few comments, so I'd like to sort of enable the people that can't sort of unmute themselves. So we've got John has said that during lockdown they ran a community support line for shielded residents, which was 3,000 plus during the course of this. We identified 380 people who had no support. That's a lot of people, isn't it? And from this, we set up keep in touch calls and identified what people wanted to do to manage their well-being. This feeds into social prescribing and opportunities rather than driving through the medical model. So it sounds like that John is kind of really mirroring and echoing the stuff that you were saying, Simon. And how
I think John is from Telford, Tess, and and Adele from Telford is kind of mirroring that further down the feed, which is great. Obviously, there's great minds in Telford.
Can I come in on this? There's a really interesting thing when we put out a call for buddies and to support. When COVID came through, we put out a call for people to do supportive calls, and then we said who would like a supportive call. We got far more people saying they would be happy to help someone else than people who would admit to saying, I would like help. And what we realized was that those people who wanted help actually needed help as well. So we're trying to actually take apart that I'm a helper, I'm someone who needs help, because that's an unhelpful categorization. It's really just putting people in touch. But absolutely, Zoe, we're trying to move away from that kind of this is something that is done to you by professionals, and actually it's much more about the support. If you've not, I'm going to plug Rekindling Democracy by Cormac Russell, which is a fantastic book which talks about this in a great lot of detail. It's just trying to move away from people parachuting in and fixing things to actually what can we do for ourselves. It's the idea of community as being the building block of how we're going to move forward.
And it looks like Danny has a question as well, Tess.
Oh yeah, do you want to read it out? I can't quite see it at the moment.
It isn't a question, she's just cryptically she says, I have a question.
Okay, well,
Yeah, that's definitely, that's one way of doing it, is providing opportunities. People, when they volunteer, they realise the benefits to themselves. So that's a really good way of doing it. I think also making it a really low barrier to getting involved. So, for instance, I'm involved with the local park run, and it's really hard. You know, if you're going to go to join a park run, what do I wear? When do I turn up? You've not done it before. Whereas actually, if you give them, here's a phone number for someone, and like if you're the buddy from park run, we call them ambassadors, but essentially if you're representing park run, it's like, look, come down a bit before, I'll go around with you. It just, everyone tends to be really friendly. They want people involved in their particular group. So just making that the entry barrier as low as possible, and just providing that someone who's going to walk alongside with you. It becomes this really interesting question about loneliness versus isolation, and loneliness is essentially the subjective experience of isolation. Some people are isolated and really happy with it, totally self-sufficient, it's not a problem, and you can be lonely in the crowd. So they are different things, and we tend to lump them in together, which I've done in my talk. But actually, I would say that they are separate things, and loneliness is the problem, but it's very stigmatizing. It's also incredibly dangerous. It's as bad for you as smoking, you know, in terms of mortality. If you're lonely, you're twice as likely to die. So getting around the stigma of it and trying not to label it as loneliness, is just trying to frame it in terms of these are activities, these are sources of support, is I'm sure the way around. Great.
And that's a really good question, actually, Danny. So I've just made one of our polls visible, which actually is anonymous. So it'll just show votes in the room. So if you click on next to chat, you've got polls. And the question is, have you felt lonely in the last 6 months? So just vote, and then we can sort of see what everybody in the room kind of thinks.
It's a really difficult thing. It's really hard to admit to, you know, just that kind of, I can see why people, I've just ticked no, but I suspect, you know, if you'd asked me at some of those times, I'd have said yes. I mean, it's been an unprecedented 6 months of just these huge changes, and there are so many knock-on effects that I think we'll see for years to come. So it's been a very
and interestingly, on our little vote, it shows that we've had 33% of the room said no, they haven't felt lonely, and actually 6%. So, Danny, you haven't overshared. You've just probably voiced something that quite a few of us wanted to say, probably. So, I think it is really important, you know, to saying that distinction between them and us. It isn't. It's all of us, isn't it? Really.
Rachel's talking about technology, Tess.
Rachel
Forbister is
Rachel?
talking about I was going to say Frobisher, but then I realised it wasn't.
Forbister, yes, I've got an awkward surname. Yeah, so I was just talking about technology and how that plays a really important part, not in just connecting people, but, you know, COVID's accelerated the amount of technology, and it's just so vitally important that we reach out, particularly to that older generation with technology. I've worked with a lot of GPs, Simon. In the past, I worked in a CCG rolling out tech, and it took me 2 years to get 15 practices to use video, and I don't even think they were really using it. And then COVID came, and all 39 practices had to use it. So it's just that mindset, isn't it? That change behaviour and what we do to encourage them to do and connect in a different, safer way, more than anything. So yeah, it was just kind of getting that message across to people. I've joined TSA Voice, which is a fantastic not-for-profit organisation. We're working very closely with community catalysts. on a big project, and that's what we specialise in as an industry. We have a lot of members who are delivering telecare products, sensors, iPads, telehealth, remote monitoring devices, that whole kind of field, and it's really our time. If there's anything positive comes out of COVID, then it's around technology, and it's got a place to stay for the future. I just think we all need to adapt and learn and make sure that we take the people on the journey with us, and have that explanation, and have our kind of digital experts out in the different areas to make sure that they are supported. Yes.
I think that's absolutely right. My one caveat is that it looks like a meeting, and sometimes what I'm noticing is that we're missing the stuff between the meetings, which is the real glue. It's the fact that after the meeting I'll sit and chat to someone, and that's often where the work goes. And I fully encourage people to turn up 5 minutes before a meeting and to linger on afterwards, because I think that's really beneficial. We're doing 11 till 12 and then 12 till 1, and we don't even have time for a wee break. And those breaks.
Yeah. It is, definitely. And I've tried to stagger mine, doing 15 minutes in between, because you don't get time to grab a cup of coffee. You just kind of, it's, it is quite challenging. And I feel as though actually I'm working a lot more because of video, where before I had all these interactions, travelling in between, thinking, how did I squeeze all this work in before? And it just feels as though that 10-minute conversation is now a 1-hour Teams meeting. And I'm just not sure we've got the balance quite right at the moment. And I think we need to look after our own mental health around that. Otherwise, our days are just stretching and stretching and stretching. And my office is in the house, and I don't see anybody for days and days. So it's definitely different. But I couldn't do without that technology. It's so much better to see people on video than it is just to do a phone call. You do feel as though you're more connected with people. Yeah.
Well, it's been fantastic to sort of hear, and I think there's some really interesting points around technology. We feel so connected, that sometimes it can also be kind of overwhelming. I would definitely agree with you, Rachel. There's our boundaries, our physical boundaries have gone, and we're all having to suddenly learn how to make them, aren't we? I think, and that can be quite challenging. So that time has flown by in our workshop, and we haven't entirely covered everything that we'd hoped, but I think that there's been some really good things covered, and I'd really appreciate your views on whether in your local area, whether you know of people who are kind of connecting and collaborating with each other. And when I've just opened the poll, so you'll be able to vote yes, no, or don't know. And I guess in the last kind of couple of minutes while people are doing the poll, I'd also kind of invite you to think about linking from what Maggie, Simon, Reese, and Danny have all kind of articulated in our discussion is, how are you going to make more? So we've got 6 months of, increased isolation compared to a year ago. How are you going to make more connections in your professional life, but also in your personal life? How are you going to make those links? And maybe pop some ideas in chat for the last few minutes, or chat aloud if you've got something that you'd like to share with everybody else. Tumbleweed silence.
Got quite a bit in the chat though.
Okay. Oh, Maggie's telling everybody that the creative bags are free. That's really great, Maggie, to know that. Great conversations from Zoe.
Digital inclusion and digital exclusion, Tess, is coming up as a little bit of a theme. People talking digital buddies, and kind of the real issue of digital inequality.
Yeah.
And the trouble is the people we're most trying to reach are the ones who are least likely to be able to access it. So I really like the idea of kind of digital buddies and that sort of thing. But actually, most of those people are very connected. There's a Facebook page in the town where a lot of this work goes on. I personally don't really like Facebook because I think it can deteriorate quite rapidly. But the people we were trying to reach were very much digitally excluded.
And that's really challenging. We did the same. I work with a brilliant Sunderland-based, you can probably tell by my accent, and I'm from the north. But Dr. Martin Weatherhead, who works in a highly deprived area, had exactly the same challenge. He didn't want somebody to not be able to benefit from technology who maybe had COPD as a result of their inequality. in terms of deprivation. So we categorised and we said, I want my bottom quartile of patients to be targeted because that's where we're going to get the biggest outcomes from. So we bought iPads, and if we lost a few along the way, we lost them, and we got something like 50 gigabytes of data to put into those iPads because actually we didn't want them to run out of data. We let them use them for what it want. If they wanted to go on Facebook or they wanted to video call their friends, they could. But the most important thing was that we could collect health data and keep them out of hospital. So there's a lot of GPs out there who do have that same challenge, but they want to think differently and will invest in that. And if that cost us, I don't know, £300 for an iPad, £200 a year for gigabytes, probably costs not even £1,000. One hospital admission has paid for itself, hasn't it? So it's just thinking differently, I think, about how we do things and actually how CCGs invest in those different things in the future and how they see deprivation and not seeing technology as a barrier.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for giving us that, Rachel. Those final thoughts. So I'm going to wrap up now and end the workshop. I really appreciate you all coming, and just, you know, the conversation and the ideas and the sharing has been fantastic. So you will be able to come back and visit this after both conferences have finished. So now it's kind of back to the lobby and then into Sian's roundup, where we'll kind of see what the learning from the day has been. Again, massive thank you to both Simon and Maggie for being willing to give their time and tell us today about what they've been doing. Really good to see you all.
Great, Steph. Thanks all. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Cheers.
Thanks, Tess.